Hey gang, what's going on? Welcome back to the Square Roundtable, the show where we discuss one specific topic that either one of you beautiful people brought up or that throughout time we feel the obligation to bring it up here. Remember, we also do have a podcast, but I'm here with a lovely panel. Ryan, Keith, Juan, names are down below, and if you look up above, the topic is a little morbid. Then, yeah, that too. But the topic is a little morbid than what we are used to. And we are going to hypothetically talk about the inevitable because everybody at some point in their life dies, guys. It is 100% statistically true. Yeah, we're starting down at the very bottom. So what would WWE look like if Vince McMahon was no longer around? A lot of people bring up, oh, Vince is the reason that this is happening or that is happening. He is so out of touch. All of these things. So the first thing that I want to bring up to you guys, starting with you, Ryan, is what would you say is Vince's biggest contribution to wrestling as a whole?
Probably his biggest contribution, I would say, is WrestleMania and the entire kind of pay-per-view format. Vince McMahon was very much a pioneer of that. And also kind of just having globalizing wrestling. Before there was this territory system and Vince McMahon came around, bought up all the territories and kind of nationalized one brand of wrestling across an entire country and then an entire world. So I think, looking at it from a high level, those probably are the two biggest things Vince McMahon has done.
Absolutely, and you can't really discredit how Vince... I know we complain about it a lot, but the fact that Vince took wrestling and turned it into entertainment is another huge thing, because who knows if WWE would have been this big global thing if it just stayed the way it used to be with Peter Von Eimer's gonna go face Bruno Sammartino for the WWF title tonight. It would have...
It's like you've done that voice before.
I know, right? But I don't think that wrestling would have became what it was if Vince never really had the foresight to make it change.
Yeah, I think the key word is transformation. He was able to take something for better or worse, which is something we can maybe get to. Although we've talked about sports versus sports entertainment here. But Vince took wrestling, which was this carny type thing that people saw as a side thing, and turned it into an entertainment spectacle, which to this day is here. So the next thing is, say Vince McMahon does pass away. How do you think you would feel? Yeah, could be immortal.
Yeah, this is all theoretical.
He could outlive us.
Because I'm not convinced that he is a human being. He's probably going to live. Yeah,
a lot of people think that.
Yeah.
So how do you guys think you'd react? You wake up. We've sadly seen things like this with Chris Benoit, Eddie Guerrero, all of the great legends that have passed away. What about Vince? How do you think you would react?
Devastated. Honest to God, I think I would be devastated when I find out that Vince McMahon passes away. When you really get down to it, for my love of wrestling, there isn't a person that has influenced my life more than Vince McMahon. And I've never even met the dude. And it feels weird to say that.
That says a lot.
But I think it would crush me if I found out.
I mean, let's put it into this. Is there any single other person in any entertainment that you've thought about what's going to happen when they're going to pass away? Vince McMahon is like the topic when it comes to something like this. Nobody really talks about anyone else because they have such an impact on this company, and he is such an influence and controls everything and has, built this entire company and has been an innovator and all of this. So this is why it's talked about so much, is because nobody truly knows what's actually going to happen, because so much is probably going to change because of it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's funny. I think the only example I can bring up that is of equal magnitude, at least for us, would be like a Steve Jobs. You need to talk about maybe like a pioneer or something like that. When Steve Jobs passed away, obviously talking about Apple, people were thinking, so is Apple going to change the way they do their business? And I think that's a lot of the worry that people have, either for a positive or negative light. People say, oh, Triple H is doing great things with NXT. He should bring that up to the main roster. So what do you guys think would be the best change that could come out of this? Because at any time that there's a new director, a new manager, people always expect to see some kind of change. And with the top guy that is the reason we consume all of this, starting with you, Keith, what would you expect or like to see from a new standpoint?
I would like to see NXT become the norm. If this really is the case, and Vince is the thing that is making the WWE what it is, and then NXT's over here doing what it's doing, then if that NXT thing became the main roster under the guise of Triple H and Stephanie McMahon, if that's what even happens, once again, completely theoretical, odds are probably, but you never know, right? But I think that could be one of the, if not the biggest positive change that you could see happen in that situation.
Yeah, we get a lot of complaint. You know, you hear a lot of people who are fans of WWE complain about the staleness of the product and a lot of these kind of continuing tropes that happen. You know, these same matchups happening over and over again, things like that. And pretty much to kind of add to what Keith's saying is, you know, Triple H and Stephanie are like the de facto heirs to the throne. You know, these two people are going to be taking over the company when Vince finally decides to hang it up. You know, he doesn't necessarily have to die, but a lot of us assume he's not leaving. He's not leaving until he passes away.
Yeah.
So we'll have Triple H and Stephanie kind of running things, and the best example we have to look to of what the future could look like is how Triple H runs NXT. And it seems like Triple H might not be as micromanaging, where he's kind of letting these people in NXT. Granted, it's a low risk environment, NXT. So these people are they have a lot more breathing room with things like promos and matches. So we don't know how Triple H would handle a Monday Night Raw with no Vince McMahon kind of watching over him. But we assume that a lot of the things, at least some of those elements from NXT, would be carried over.
Yeah, so on the positive side, we're seeing that, as you guys have very much mentioned, there could be a shift in overproduction or overproducing the product into more flexible, let people be a little bit more who they are backstage, or maybe in NXT. We see a lot of this stuff happen backstage.
Look at Michael
in the
Cole
WWE Network shows
as an example of that.
Yeah.
Like the ones where Vince McMahon isn't, quote, in his ear. It's a whole different story, night and day. The Stooge Michael, as we call him, on Monday night, just shilling. And then the Michael Cole that we got at Beast of the East, where it just seemed like, okay, he's actually going to call like a show in a way that he wants to do it. Like those kind of changes, I think, are what you're getting at.
One thing I want to bring up, there's a really good article titled 10 Predictions for WWE Without Vince McMahon. This is on WhatCulture.com. We'll post it in the description. One of the things, we're talking about positive or hopefully positive changes, but we're completely neglecting the fact, as we stated in the beginning, Vince McMahon is the reason that we have what we have today. So in a world of WWE without Vince McMahon, would people lose some confidence in the product, maybe lose investors? This is a publicly traded company, and as fans, we may not give a crap too much about that, but the fact of the matter is, if there are less investors and all that, we would see an impact on the product in some form. Do you think that people would have the same faith without Vince McMahon?
I think that's definitely a concern, because you look at us. I mean, we've never known WWE without Vince McMahon. So, like, that uncertainty, I think, also kind of creates curiosity, though. I think maybe people might lose faith in it after a while if they didn't like what they were seeing. But you have to think, the first show under somebody else's reign, like, everybody's going to want to tune in to see what that show's like, and I think people would stick with it and see it out. And mostly, wrestling fans are very loyal, so it's hard to get them away from the product. So I think it would take a vast deviation from what we know to get people to truly turn away from it.
Plus, what's going on in NXT right now would probably help soften that blow, because it's not just a complete unknown factor. We've seen what goes on down there, and if Vince really is hands-off when it comes to NXT, then you really get to see, okay, this has been going on here for a while. This is what investors and shareholders and stuff might be led to believe is going to happen on now this grand scale. So I don't think it would be a very scary thing. Change is always scary. That's what it comes down to. But I don't think it would be that crazy impactful, just because what's going on right now it almost makes a little bit of an overlap, really.
Yeah, it really does. And I guess the closing question or topic, if you will, is that Vince McMahon, we've talked about the pay-per-views. We've neglected the topic of territories. Before WWE was this massive thing that it is now, we had all these territories throughout the states, and Vince McMahon was openly the person to really just sort of either buy out or drive out of business with all these territories. Now, immediately you may be thinking to yourself, so maybe that'll stop. Maybe WWE will welcome a thing like Ring of Honor, TNA into something like the network. But keep in mind with NXT, a lot of times they've competed in same locations or dates as Ring of Honor, and even Triple H has pointed out, if that affects business, but it is our growth. I'm paraphrasing here, so don't quote me on this, but basically it's the nature of the business. So we're seeing both sides. So maybe Triple H could be leading, Vince McMahon could be leading, but companies could be affected. So would you see a unification or support, or do you think it would be the same, or just sort of more splitting?
Well, WWE is a giant on its own. I don't think whether Vince is at the helm or not would impact buying those companies, because if nothing is ever going to dethrone WWE at this point, I think it's just way too big for that. So if an opportunity arises to buy it, I don't think it really matters who's at the helm. They're going to buy it, and then that'll be the end of that.
Yeah, I think it kind of comes down to that's more on like the business side of things, and if that makes business sense. Where we're already seeing right now that WWE is kind of partnering with that company Evolve.
Yeah.
So nothing's out of the question, even with Vince McMahon at the helm or not. So I think if it's the right type of situation, that maybe it could happen. Maybe, if Vince McMahon isn't there, Triple H, who seems to mend a lot of relationships, maybe he's not going to have as much of a vendetta against a company like TNA or something like that. So maybe that's more likely to happen without Vince McMahon there. But I think just in general, if it makes business sense, no matter who's kind of heading it up, then you can expect to see it happen or not happen.
Final thing, in one word, Vince McMahon passes away. We've gotten over the emotions about the person passing away. In one word, what would define your expectations for WWE? Something like hopeful, scared, something like that. It's difficult because we've never, as you mentioned, Ryan, we've never visualized WWE without Vince McMahon. So what does that even look like? Most people, even from Vince Sr., just have not seen that world.
I think in both the negative and positive way, if I were to distill it down into one word, it would be turmoil. It would be chaos. It would be crazy.
I was actually going to say chaos.
Mm-hmm. Chaos is a good one.
Yeah, because it would be a very telling and terrifying time probably for the company, just because. And think of WWE like a country for a minute. What happens to a country when it loses its leader? It goes crazy for a while until stability can be regained. So yeah, I think it would just be crazy. It's hard to think about.
Yeah, he puts himself as such an integral part, and he's he is the final word on basically everything that goes on. So for that to just go away, there's going to definitely be some turmoil for at least a little while before things finally settle out.
And a huge power vacuum.
Yeah, so we have chaos, we have turmoil. In my case, I'll say the word is intrigued. I'd be really curious as to see what would happen with WWE after the passing of Vince McMahon Jr. So for those watching, definitely drop your reactions, your thought process. Hypothetically, Vince McMahon has passed away.
And it's pure hypothetical because he's never going to die.
Yeah, exactly. We are all going to die before Vince McMahon, if ever. He's like a cockroach. There could be a nuclear outbreak, and he will somehow manage to survive.
He will save humanity.
Yeah, it's like he's part of Fallout or something like that. But yeah, definitely drop your feedback, your thought process regarding WWE after Vince McMahon in the comment section. Make sure that if you like this video, you give us a like. And if you really like us, especially look at Keith. Look at that smile, Keith. Look at that thing. Subscribe to the channel because the three of us gentlemen have a podcast available every single Tuesday night right here. So until next time, drop suggestions for future topics right here for the Square Roundtable, and we will be back with tons more right here. I'm Byte.